On the morning of July 16th, 2016, emergency personnel were dispatched to a quiet neighborhood in Matthews, North Carolina. The call had come from 48-year-old Kimberly Reps, who told a 911 operator that both she and her husband had been shot by an intruder inside their home. Within minutes, deputies and paramedics arrived at the property, prepared for a violent and chaotic scene. Inside the house, responders found Kimberly lying on the floor, bleeding heavily from a wound to her shoulder. She was conscious but in visible shock, repeating her account of being attacked by a man who had entered their bedroom in the early hours of the morning. Just a short distance away, in the master bedroom, the situation was even more dire. 54-year-old Robert Robb Reps was discovered on the bed, gravely injured with a gunshot wound to the forehead. The amount of blood and trauma indicated the seriousness of his condition. Paramedics worked quickly to stabilize both victims. Kimberly was transported for urgent treatment, while efforts to save Robb were carried out on the scene. Despite every attempt, his injuries were too severe. Robb lost consciousness, and by the time he was being transferred to hospital, he succumbed to the gunshot wound. Kimberly's statement to deputies painted the picture of a terrifying home invasion. She described the intruder as a white male dressed entirely in black, wearing a hat, and armed with a gun. At first glance, it seemed like a senseless act of random violence. Robert Robb Reps was born in Detroit in 1961 and raised in Georgia, where he developed a strong sense of purpose and compassion. After completing college, he pursued a career in prosthetics, a field that allowed him to use his skills to improve the lives of others. His work involved creating artificial limbs, and patients later recalled how he guided them with patience and understanding through some of their most difficult experiences. Robb's personal life, however, was more complex. He married in 1991 and became the father of 2 daughters. That marriage ended in divorce, and he later entered a long relationship with Lynn Roberts, who worked in medical billing. Their partnership lasted 13 years before eventually coming to an end. Shortly afterward, Robb met Kimberly Polk. Kimberly had been born and raised in North Carolina. Like Robb, she had already experienced multiple marriages. Her first marriage ended on amicable terms, but her second ended with considerable strain. She was a mother of 2 children from her earlier relationships. Friends described Kimberly as smart, athletic, and outgoing, someone who seemed to embrace life with energy and confidence. The relationship between Robb and Kimberly moved quickly. Their connection grew after Robb's breakup with Roberts, and within a short period, they decided to marry. However, beneath the surface of the seemingly fresh start, there were already tensions. Robb's regular drinking, his twice-yearly trips to St. Martin with friends, and Kimberly's discovery of signs of possible infidelity cast shadows over the marriage. As law enforcement secured the scene inside the Reps' home, detectives began their search for answers. One of the first observations was the absence of forced entry. Doors and windows showed no signs of tampering, and valuables remained untouched. This finding contradicted the idea of a random burglary gone wrong, and cast immediate doubt on Kimberly's claim of violent home invasion. While in the hospital, Kimberly repeated her story. She told investigators that she had woken in the night to find a white male dressed entirely in black, wearing a hat, standing inside the bedroom. According to her account, the intruder shot her in the shoulder before turning the gun on Robb. The story seemed to fit the chaos of the scene, yet inconsistencies became clear once detectives began canvassing the neighborhood. Despite the early morning hour, a nearby resident exercising outside recalled seeing no strangers or unusual movement around the time of the 911 call. Investigators also interviewed Robb's former partner, Lynn Roberts, given her long history with him. Roberts, however, provided a firm alibi and was quickly eliminated as a suspect. Attention soon turned back to the household itself. Detectives collected accounts from friends and family about Robb's character. Many described him as kind and professional during the day, but noted a darker, more volatile side when drinking in the evenings. Combined with Kimberly's growing frustrations over his trips to St. Martin and her discovery of evidence of another woman, detectives saw new reasons to question her role in the crime. As the investigation progressed, forensic experts carefully examined the physical evidence inside the Reps' home. Their findings began to contradict Kimberly's initial account. She had told detectives that she was sitting up in bed when she was shot. However, trajectory analysis of the bullet wounds painted a very different picture. The angle of the bullet revealed that it traveled downward through the mattress, making it impossible for Kimberly to have been upright. Instead, the evidence suggested she had been lying down when the shot was fired. Another troubling discovery involved the firearm itself. The gun used in the attack was not an unfamiliar weapon brought by an outsider, but Rob's own firearm. Investigators questioned why a supposed intruder would break into a home and choose to use the victim's personal gun instead of one they had brought. The choice seemed unlikely for a random attack and further undermined Kimberly's version of events. Forensic testing also revealed issues with the weapon during the shooting. A casing suggested the gun had malfunctioned or jammed, possibly because it was not held with secure grip. To detectives, this detail indicated inexperience and clumsiness, something inconsistent with the idea of a dangerous, prepared intruder. Piece by piece, the scientific evidence dismantled Kimberly's narrative. The physical details pointed toward a staged scene, one where Rob had been deliberately shot in his own bedroom, and Kimberly had injured herself afterward in an attempt to appear as a second victim. 2 days after the shooting, Kimberly was stable enough to face detectives at the sheriff's office. At first, she maintained the same story she had told in the hospital, that she and Rob were victims of a masked intruder who had stormed into their bedroom. But investigators were prepared. Piece by piece, they laid out the forensic findings that contradicted her account. The bullet trajectory, the use of Rob's own gun, and the absence of any forced entry. As the evidence piled up, Kimberly's confidence began to crumble. After hours of questioning, she finally broke down and admitted what detectives had suspected. She had shot Rob while he was sleeping, and then turned the gun on herself to create the illusion of a violent home invasion. Kimberly offered several explanations for her actions. She described deep resentment over Rob's heavy drinking, humiliation after discovering signs of his infidelity, and claims that she had endured sexual abuse within the marriage. According to her, the situation had become unbearable, and killing him felt like her only escape. Prosecutors, however, saw things differently. They found no supporting evidence of abuse, no police reports, medical files, or prior complaints. Friends and family members also disputed her claims, insisting that Rob was not violent and portray him instead as a devoted father and hard worker. With her confession, the mystery unraveled. What once appeared to be a random act of violence was now revealed as a staged crime born from jealousy and desperation. Kimberly was formally charged with first-degree murder, a charge that carried the possibility of life in prison. From the outset, prosecutors recognized that her defense strategy would center on painting Rob as an abusive, alcoholic husband, claims that could sway a jury despite the lack of evidence. Concerned about the uncertainty of trial and mindful of the wishes of Rob's family, they began exploring the option of a plea agreement. In 2020, nearly 4 years after Rob's death, Kimberly accepted a deal. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to a term of 20 to 25 years behind bars. The resolution avoided a lengthy and emotionally draining trial, but left many divided. Rob's adult daughters, who had been consulted during the process, supported the plea to ensure some measure of accountability. Yet others in the community felt the sentence was too lenient for the deliberate killing of a husband in his sleep. The emotional reactions reflected this divide. Kimberly's sister defended her as a survivor of a toxic marriage, arguing that she had acted out of desperation. On the other side, Rob's friends and former partner rejected those claims, insisting that he was not abusive and deserved justice in the fullest sense. Amid the legal outcome, Rob's memory endured. Colleagues and patients remembered his compassion, especially his dedication to helping amputees regain independence. One patient recalled how Rob personally guided her through the difficult process of adapting to a prosthetic limb, a gesture that left an enduring mark. Let's turn to the next case, the treasure hunter murder. How love, betrayal, and greed ended Milton Sawyer's life. Milton Henry Sawyer was born in 1963 and raised in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. He grew up in a large blended household that included siblings, step-siblings, and half-siblings, and he remained close to them throughout his life. From an early age, Milton developed an interest in collectibles, learning directly from his father, who introduced him to the trade of buying and selling valuable items. What began as a childhood fascination soon grew into a lifelong passion that shaped his future. As an adult, Milton transformed his interest into a livelihood by opening his own antique and collectibles store, which he named the Treasure Hunter. The shop quickly became a local landmark in Elizabeth City, drawing in residents who wanted to buy or sell antiques, jewelry, and gold. Milton's knowledge and enthusiasm for collectibles gave the store unique character, making it more than a business. It became a gathering place where people exchanged stories, discovered treasures, and connected with their community. Milton was known for his warm personality and approachable nature. Friends, family, and customers described him as happy-go-lucky, kind-hearted, and always willing to lend a hand. His reputation extended beyond his store. Many in Elizabeth City admired him so deeply that they believed he had the charisma and likability to one day run for mayor. Milton's strong relationships, commitment to his store, and devotion to his children painted the portrait of a man who was both respected and loved. In 2011, Milton Sawyer, a divorced father of 3 children, crossed paths with Angel Kessinger at their children's school. Angel was also navigating the challenges of divorce while raising 4 children of her own. Their mutual understanding of single parenthood created a bond that quickly developed into a close relationship. Within a year, following the finalization of Angel's divorce, Milton and Angel married in 2012. Together, they blended their households into a family of 7 children, which was no small task, but one they both initially embraced. From the outside, their marriage appeared full of promise. Angel became a fixture at Milton's shop, the Treasure Hunter, where she helped organize displays and manage the growing flow of antiques and collectibles. Friends noticed how Milton appreciated her involvement, and family members recalled his efforts to make her feel secure in their new life together. On social media, Milton openly expresses gratitude for having found love again, often posting heartfelt words about Angel and celebrating the new chapter they were building. However, in private, tensions gradually surfaced. Milton's siblings later reflected on Angel's demanding personality, describing her as narcissistic and in constant need of attention. To keep the peace, Milton showered her with gifts and went to great lengths to satisfy her expectations. While the public image of their marriage was one of unity and affection, privately, the relationship carried undercurrents of strain. These contrasting perspectives foreshadowed the deeper conflicts that would ultimately shape the tragic events ahead. In the early hours of August 2nd, 2018, a frantic scene unfolded in Elizabeth City. Angel Sawyer appeared at a neighbor's home, bloodied and hysterical, insisting that an intruder had broken into the house and attacked them. Deputies were dispatched immediately, and upon entering the residence, they discovered a disturbing sight. Milton Sawyer lay face down in the bathroom, his hands bound tightly behind his back with duct tape. He had been strangled to death, and the violent nature of the crime was immediately evident. The bedroom was in disarray, with clothing thrown across the floor and drawers pulled open as if a robbery had taken place. Investigators noticed that the back door showed no forced entry and had been accessed with a key that was conspicuously left in plain view. Angel recounted her story to deputies, claiming she and Milton had been watching television when a masked intruder suddenly appeared, demanded money, and tied Milton up. According to her account, she was struck on the head, lost consciousness, and awoke to find Milton dead. At the hospital, Angel repeated the same version of events, emphasizing that the intruder threatened them and suggesting the attack might be connected to Milton's antique shop, the Treasure Hunter. She further claimed that jewelry was missing, reinforcing the appearance of robbery. Despite her account, investigators quickly noted troubling inconsistencies. The readily available house key and the lack of forced entry raised doubts. The autopsy later confirmed that Milton had died from manual strangulation, a method inconsistent with Angel's tale of an armed gunman. The evidence pointed to a staged crime scene, and investigators began to scrutinize Angel's role more closely. As the investigation progressed, deputies grew increasingly skeptical of Angel Sawyer's version of events. What initially appeared to be a violent home invasion began to unravel under closer examination. Milton's siblings stepped forward, voicing long-standing concerns about Angel's personality. They described her as manipulative and self-centered, explaining that Milton had tried to keep her happy with gifts and attention, but had recently begun questioning her loyalty. Their insight pushed investigators to look deeper into Angel's private life. It was not long before detectives uncovered a critical lead. Angel was having an affair with her physical therapist, Isaac Melcher, a married father of 3. Rumors suggested that Milton himself suspected the relationship and had even confronted Melcher directly at his workplace. According to reports, Milton accused him of pursuing Angel, but Melcher flatly denied any involvement. When investigators brought Melcher in for questioning, he continued to deny the affair and any connection to Milton's death. However, his story soon showed cracks. Melcher explained that his phone had been destroyed in water damage, forcing him to buy a new one at Walmart. Detectives checked surveillance footage and quickly discovered that his claim did not hold up. Shortly after providing this questionable explanation, Melcher abruptly left North Carolina and traveled to Oregon, a decision that only deepened suspicions about his role. Meanwhile, Angel continued to present herself as a victim, insisting she had been the target of unwanted male attention rather than an active participant in an affair. Taken together, Angel's inconsistent statements and Melcher's suspicious behavior painted a troubling picture. The case shifted dramatically from the possibility of a botched robbery to the chilling prospect of a murder-for-love plot involving both Angel and her secret partner. The investigation reached a decisive turning point when a tip arrived from Oregon. There, Isaac Melcher had confided in his former youth pastor and mentor, Louis Casimir. Struggling under the weight of guilt, Melcher admitted to killing Milton Sawyer. He described how he strangled in the bathroom and then staged the scene to look like a robbery gone wrong. Casimir was torn between loyalty to someone he once guided and the moral responsibility of doing what was right. Ultimately, he chose to cooperate with law enforcement. With Casimir's assistance, investigators arranged for recorded conversations that captured Melcher confessing once again. During these exchanges, Melcher not only described his direct role in the killing, but also laid bare the affair with Angel Sawyer and her influence over the crime. He revealed that Angel had told him her husband was controlling and would never allow her to leave, convincing him that murder was the only solution. Melcher explained that Angel had left a house key for him to gain entry on the night of August 2nd. After Milton was killed, Angel participated in staging the crime scene, scattering belongings to mimic a burglary. She even instructed Melcher to strike her in the head, so her injuries would appear genuine when she told her story to authorities. These taped admissions, paired with Melcher's earlier lies and Angel's inconsistent statements, became the linchpin of the prosecution's case. For investigators, what had once been suspicion now crystallized into certainty. The confessions demonstrated planning, coordination, and motive, establishing the foundation for charges of premeditated murder and conspiracy against both Angel Sawyer and Isaac Melcher. On August 21st, 2018, the investigation reached its culmination when both Angel Sawyer and Isaac Melcher were arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The arrest brought relief to Milton Sawyer's grieving family, who had long suspected Angel's involvement. Once in custody, Angel admitted to her affair with Melcher, but sought to distance herself from the killing. She portrayed Melcher as obsessed, unstable, and ultimately responsible for crime. Investigators, however, dismantled her account by presenting evidence of her planning role and highlighting the staged nature of the crime scene. The case moved slowly through the court system, with years of preparation and delays. In 2021, Angel stood trial for first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Jurors heard recordings of Melcher's confession, testimony from witnesses, and evidence showing Angel's manipulative influence. The prosecution argued convincingly that she was not only aware of the plan, but instrumental in orchestrating it. After deliberation, the jury convicted her on both counts. Angel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring she would never again walk free. Melcher, who initially faced the same charges, chose a different path. He agreed to testify against Angel in exchange for a plea deal. On the stand, he described the affair, Angel's pressure, and the detailed planning that led to Milton's death. In return for his cooperation, prosecutors reduced his charge to second-degree murder. He received a 20-year sentence, with a projected release in 2042. The contrasting sentences reflected the prosecution's strategy. securing Angel's conviction by leveraging Melcher's testimony. The death of Milton Sawyer left a permanent mark on his family and the Elizabeth City community. For his children and siblings, the loss was deeply personal, as they grieved a father and brother remembered for his warmth and generosity. His antique shop, the Treasure Hunter, once filled with stories and laughter, became a painful reminder of the life taken through betrayal. Community members struggled to process the truth. Angel, who had presented herself as a devoted wife, was revealed as a central figure in Milton's murder. The contrast between her public image and her hidden actions shocked those who had once admired the couple. Prosecutors underscored how Milton's search for love and stability had been twisted by manipulation and deceit, ending in tragedy. Despite the circumstances of his death, Milton's legacy endures. He is remembered as a kind man, respected in his town, and deeply loved by family. Let's talk about Emmanuel Harrow case, from reported kidnapping to murder charges. On August 14, 2025, in Yucaipa, California, a call to authorities reported a chilling scene. According to Rebecca Harrow, she had taken her infant son, Emmanuel, to a local sporting goods store. While in the parking lot, as she was changing her baby's diaper, she claimed a man suddenly appeared and struck her on the head. Rebecca told investigators she lost consciousness. When she regained awareness, Emmanuel was gone. Her account immediately launched an urgent response. Detectives, patrol officers, and specialized search teams were mobilized. The sheriff's department announced that all available resources were being directed toward finding the missing child. Flyers were printed and distributed across San Bernardino County. Television crews broadcast Emmanuel's photograph, while social media amplified the alert, fueling widespread public concern. Rebecca and her husband, Jake, stood before cameras the following morning, holding missing child flyers. Both pleaded for Emmanuel's safe return. Their voices shook, their faces streaked with tears, as they begged anyone with information to come forward. The emotional images spread quickly, reinforcing the sense of crisis. Yet, within just 24 hours, troubling inconsistencies began to surface. Investigators noted that the parking lot, often busy, had yielded no witnesses to the alleged assault. Security cameras in the area showed nothing to confirm Rebecca's account. Officers also observed contradictions in her retelling of the timeline and details of the supposed attack. These doubts carried weight. The Amber Alert system, typically activated in such dire cases, remained unused. Authorities signaled early skepticism, even as public fear intensified. Investigators pressed forward after Rebecca Harrow's report, determined to verify every detail of the alleged kidnapping. Almost immediately, contradictions emerged. In interviews, Rebecca's statements shifted, raising doubts about the sequence of events. When detectives asked her to clarify specific inconsistencies, she abruptly declined further cooperation, leaving investigators even more suspicious. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses provided no evidence of struggle or assault in the parking lot. No bystanders reported seeing an attack or the sudden disappearance of a child, despite the store's steady traffic. 9 searches were deployed, but the dogs detected nothing consistent with Rebecca's account. Warrants executed at the Harrow residence further undermined the story, redirecting attention away from a kidnapping scenario and toward the family itself. Authorities soon reached a decisive conclusion. No abduction had taken place. At a press conference, officials publicly announced that Emmanuel was presumed dead. The focus of the investigation had shifted, no longer a search for a missing child, but an effort to recover the boy's remains and uncover the truth of what happened inside the Harrow household. Prosecutors then filed a criminal complaint, alleging that Emmanuel had died sometime between August 5th and August 14th, days before the supposed assault in Yucaipa was ever reported. On August 22nd, the case reached a turning point. Both Rebecca and Jake Harrow were arrested at their Cabazon home. Each faced charges of murder and filing a false police report, marking the collapse of the fabricated kidnapping narrative. Following their arrests, Rebecca and Jake Harrow faced formal charges of murder and filing a false police report. Both were booked into custody on $1 million bail, reflecting the seriousness of the allegations. The case quickly moved into courtroom, drawing widespread public attention. On September 4th, at the Riverside Hall of Justice, the Harros appeared for arraignment. The courtroom was filled with spectators, reporters, and community members eager to witness the proceedings. Rebecca and Jake sat separately, their demeanor subdued. Rebecca remained silent throughout the brief hearing, while Jake only responded once, giving a short acknowledgement to a judge's procedural question. When asked to enter pleas, both declared themselves not guilty. Prosecutors, led by Riverside County District Attorney Mike Hestrin, presented their theory. They alleged that Emmanuel had not vanished in a sudden attack, but had been the victim of ongoing abuse within his home. Hestrin emphasized that the complaint reflected evidence suggesting Emmanuel was harmed over time and ultimately succumbed to those injuries. His statement framed the charges not as a tragic accident, but as a deliberate pattern of mistreatment culminating in death. Rebecca secured legal representation from attorney Jeff Moore, known for defending David and Louise Turpin in their widely publicized House of Horrors child abuse case. The move signaled her defense's intent to challenge the narrative aggressively in a trial already under intense scrutiny. Outside the courthouse, supporters gathered for vigils honoring Emmanuel, calling for justice, and raising awareness about child abuse. The case against Jake Harrow drew heightened scrutiny once his criminal past came to light. In 2018, years before Emmanuel's death, Jake had been arrested for abusing his infant daughter with his former wife. The injuries inflicted on the child were catastrophic. She suffered a skull fracture, a rib fracture, and a brain hemorrhage that left her permanently bedridden. The trauma resulted in cerebral palsy, ensuring lifelong dependence on medical care. Despite the gravity of those injuries, Jake did not serve a prison term. Instead, after pleading guilty, he received a suspended sentence accompanied by probation. As a condition, he was required to complete a 52-week batterer's treatment program. Counselors later described him as polite and attentive throughout the sessions. He was ultimately assessed as low risk for reoffending and assigned the lowest possible risk score by evaluators. That assessment would later be sharply criticized. Riverside County District Attorney Mike Hestrin condemned the lenient judgment as an outrageous error, stressing that Jake's past crimes should have warranted incarceration. In Hestrin's words, had Jake been properly sentenced in 2018, Emmanuel might still be alive in 2025. Law enforcement officials echoed those concerns, pointing directly to the justice system's failures. They argued that the decision to spare Jake from prison created the conditions for further violence. What was intended as rehabilitation had, in their view, dangerously misjudged his potential for harm. For Emmanuel's advocates, Jake's history underscored the tragic consequences of missed accountability. The disappearance and death of baby Emmanuel drew an outpouring of public grief and outrage. Community members organized vigils across Yucaipa and neighboring towns, lighting candles and leaving stuffed animals in Emmanuel's memory. Many mothers who attended the gathering spoke emotionally to reporters, expressing sorrow that the child would never see the love being shown in his honor. Their words carried a message of both mourning and frustration, underscoring a community grappling with the loss. True crime podcaster Jasmine Hernandez became one of the most visible advocates during the early court proceedings. Attending the hearings in Riverside, she spoke passionately about the need for reform. Hernandez called for the creation of a national child abuse registry, modeled after the sex offender registry, arguing it could help prevent future tragedies by alerting communities to past offenders. Her proposal gained traction among activists and drew significant media coverage. The press reported extensively on the Harrow case, frequently drawing parallels to other high-profile child abuse incidents. Coverage highlighted the connection to the Turpin case, since Rebecca's attorney, Jeff Moore, had represented the Turpins in their notorious House of Horrors trial. These comparisons deepened public interest and emphasized a disturbing pattern of abuse cases reaching national attention. Meanwhile, law enforcement and prosecutors held press conferences to counter the Harros' initial televised pleas. Officials emphasized transparency, detailing investigative findings and reaffirming their commitment to accountability. Outrage grew even stronger when Jake's 2018 abuse conviction surfaced, sparking widespread debate over systemic failures within the justice system. As the case moved forward, major questions remained unresolved. Prosecutors told reporters they had strong indications of where Emmanuel's remains might be located, but despite extensive searches, No recovery had been made. Investigators deployed cadaver dogs in areas near Moreno Valley, searching fields and remote terrain. On at least one occasion, they were accompanied by Jake Harrow. Yet the searches yielded nothing. The absence of Emmanuel's body left the case without its most critical piece of physical evidence, prolonging the community's grief. From jail, Rebecca Harrow gave interviews maintaining her innocence. She insisted she would not give up looking for her son, repeating claims that challenged the official narrative. Both parents continue to deny wrongdoing, despite the mounting evidence presented by prosecutors. Their statements fueled debate over Rebecca's role in the tragedy, whether she was a willing participant manipulated by Jake or acting under coercion. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for September 17th, setting the stage for testimony and evidence to be formally presented in court. Prosecutors reiterated their commitment to accountability, stressing that their priority was securing justice for Emmanuel's death, regardless of the parents' denials. For the public, closure remained elusive. Vigils continued, but many mourners emphasized the pain of not knowing where Emmanuel's body was. The case also raised broader questions. How had systemic failures allowed Jake to remain free, and what reforms were necessary to prevent such tragedies? For now, Emmanuel's story remained unfinished, shadowed by absence and uncertainty.